"Sorry, ma'am, your name isn't on the guest list." That's what the young woman in a headset told me, standing between me and my own son's wedding. Behind her, people were laughing, clinking champagne glasses, taking photos beside the cake I had made with my own hands, a 3-tier masterpiece of white fondant and gold roses, the most beautiful thing I'd baked in 45 years. And I wasn't allowed inside. For a moment, I didn't move. I thought maybe she was joking. I said quietly, "I'm the groom's mother, Martha Jefferson. I baked that cake." Her smile didn't change. "I understand, ma'am, but the bride's instructions were very clear." The music swelled behind her, violins and applause. Then I saw him, my son Derek, stepping out from under the arch of white roses, hand in hand with his new wife, Alyssa. He looked perfect. She looked radiant. And when his eyes met mine, he froze. He walked over slowly, adjusting his tie. "Mom, we already had the ceremony," he said, glancing around like he didn't want anyone to hear. "We only invited special people." The words hit harder than any slap. Special people. I felt the world tilt, the laughter turning sharp, the air tightening in my throat. My hands trembled, but I didn't drop the cake box. Years of piping icing had taught me control, even when your heart was melting. So I smiled. Because that's what mothers do when they've just been erased. We pretend it doesn't hurt. Then I turned around, heels sinking into the grass, and walked back to my car while strangers whispered, "Was that his mom?" I didn't look back. The sun was blinding, the road long, and the cake knife still in my purse. 3 hours earlier, that same knife had been slicing through ribbons, not hearts. My kitchen smelled like vanilla and hope. I had wrapped the cake with trembling care, whispering, "This is for Derek." Every petal, every swirl of frosting carried 20 years of sacrifice, and the dream that my son would one day be proud of me. When you're a single black mother running a small bakery in Georgia, you measure life in pounds of flour and hours of sleep. I used to wake up at 4 a.m., bake until sunrise, and deliver orders before Derek caught his school bus. I'd pack him lunch in a brown paper bag with a note, "You're my reason." He'd draw me hearts in crayon. He used to say, "When I grow up, I'll buy you a big house, Mama." I never needed the house. I just needed the promise to stay true. But promises, like sugar, burn fast when the heat's too high. That morning, as I loaded the cake into my truck, I remembered every bill I'd paid to get him there. $500 a month for his cafe rent, $7,200 for that failed coffee machine, $53,000 over 3 years. Each dollar a teaspoon of love, slowly disappearing into someone else's dream. Still, I told myself it was worth it, because a mother's pride doesn't ask for receipts until the day her name disappears from the guest list. By the time I reached home, the sky had turned a quiet orange. I set the empty cake box on the counter, its white cardboard glowing like a ghost. Then I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at my hands. The same hands that built his future, line by line, callus by callus. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from exhaustion. That's the silence that filled my house that night. I pulled out my old accounting book, the one I used to track bakery orders, and wrote a new entry. October 14th. I stopped baking for people who don't see me. My handwriting shook, but my heart didn't. The refrigerator hummed softly. The air smelled like sugar and grief. And in that stillness, I realized something no wedding invitation could ever give me: freedom. They thought leaving my name off the list would break me. They thought embarrassment would keep me quiet, but they forgot who taught them to rise before dawn, to need, to measure, to create something from nothing. I was the one who built their beginning, and soon I would build my own ending, sweeter, quieter, but stronger than anything they could imagine. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply saying, "I only bake for special people." When people see a bakery, they see sugar and smiles. They don't see the 4 a.m. alarms, the swollen hands, or the quiet tears you hide behind powdered sugar. I built Sweet Blessings Bakery from nothing but hunger and faith. Hunger to feed my boy, and faith that one day all this sacrifice would mean something. Back then, I couldn't afford fancy mixers or ovens. I used secondhand pans, borrowed from a church kitchen, and baked through the night while Derek slept on a pull-out couch behind the counter. I'd hum gospel tunes while whisking batter, pretending the rhythm could drown out the sound of bills sliding under the door. He was 5 when he asked me why we never had dinner together. I told him, "Because Mama's baking you a future." He smiled, missing a front tooth, and said, "Then I'll eat the future when it's ready." Those words kept me alive for years. When he turned 10, I started taking bigger orders: weddings, baby showers, church events. By the time he was 16, the bakery paid his private school tuition. He used to help me after class, dusting flour all over his jeans, saying, "One day, I'll run this place for you." I believed him, because mothers always do. After his father died, things got harder. Medical bills swallowed half our savings. But I never told Derek that I sometimes skipped meals so he could have new sneakers, or that I pawned my wedding ring to keep his dream alive. He was a good boy, gentle, clever, and full of charm. People loved him, and I thought, if I just keep giving, maybe love can be earned the same way bread rises, slowly, with warmth. Then came college. He wanted to study business in Atlanta. I didn't have the heart to say no, so I took out a loan, $38,000, under my name. I told myself it was an investment, not a sacrifice. But investments are supposed to give something back. This one only kept taking. Every semester I sent him $500, sometimes more, whenever he said, "Mom, just this once." He called me Supermom when the money arrived, and for a few minutes, it felt like pride again, not pity. I kept track of it all in a little blue notebook. Rent, $750. Books, $220. Emergency dentist, $430. Broken laptop, $900. Each number like a drop of blood pressed into paper. When he graduated, I cried harder than I had at my own wedding. He walked across the stage in a navy gown, and I thought, he made it. I didn't care that my credit was wrecked or my savings gone. I just wanted to believe that love had finally paid off. After college, he came home full of big plans. He wanted to open a coffee shop. The grind room, he called it. He said, "It'll have your cakes, Mom. You'll be our signature." Those words melted me faster than butter on a hot tray. I co-signed the lease. I loaned him $53,000 from my retirement account. When the papers came back, I noticed only his name on the business registration. He said, "It's just easier for taxes." And I said, "Okay." Because mothers want to believe. Belief is sweeter than truth, until it rots. The first year was rough. He called me in tears when the espresso machine broke. I sold my car to buy him another. When the shop finally opened, I made cupcakes for the grand opening, free samples for everyone. People said, "Your son's cafe is lovely." I nodded and smiled, even though half the menu came from my recipes. Then Alyssa came along. That smile, that voice that could melt glass. She was polite, pretty, said, "Yes, ma'am," and "thank you" every time. She called me Miss Martha instead of Mom. At first, I thought she was just being respectful. Later, I learned it was distance disguised as manners. After she moved in, Derek stopped calling me Supermom. He started saying, "Mom, you wouldn't understand business." He stopped asking for my opinion, but the bank transfers kept coming. Tuition, renovations, honeymoon fund, and every time I wired money, I told myself, this is love. This is what love does. Until one day, I realized love had become a bill I was paying on auto draft. I still remember the night before the wedding. I stayed up late in the bakery, piping roses until my wrists ached. The air smelled like sugar and exhaustion. I looked at that cake, perfect, glowing, heavy, and thought, maybe this time he'll say thank you. Maybe he'll finally see me. But he didn't. Instead, he erased me from the guest list. And for the first time in my life, I understood the difference between giving and surrendering. Giving builds bridges. Surrendering burns them quietly, one check at a time. That night, I opened my old notebook and saw the total again, $53,000. Next to it, I wrote, "Paid in full. Lesson learned." That night, after the wedding, the house felt heavier than ever. The air itself seemed tired, like even oxygen didn't want to stay. I placed my purse on the counter, slipped off my shoes, and watched a line of sugar fall from the hem of my dress. It glittered under the kitchen light before fading into nothing, just like me. The cake knife was still in my bag. I took it out, washed it carefully, and laid it on the counter. The blade caught the reflection of my face, older, swollen from crying, powdered with flour and humiliation. I thought about the last time I had looked in this mirror and liked what I saw. Maybe 20 years ago, maybe never. Outside, a dog barked, then silence again. I turned off every light except one. The house looked like a stage after the audience had gone home, empty, echoing, full of props that no longer meant anything. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea, staring at my hands. They were shaking slightly, still smelling of buttercream. The same hands that had built my son's dream. The same hands he now pretended didn't exist. Somewhere between exhaustion and grief, my mind started to wander. I saw flashes of his childhood. Derek running through the bakery in a little blue apron, stealing strawberries from the fridge, laughing as I pretended to chase him. That laugh used to sound like home. Now it sounded like memory. Distant and expensive. I opened my old notebook, the one where I'd written down every expense, every transfer, just this once. Page after page of numbers and apologies. Rent, tuition, renovations, honeymoon. I traced my finger along each line, as if touching the ink could undo the pain, but the ink was dry, and so was my patience. At 2 a.m., I found myself whispering to the empty room, "When did I start buying love?" The refrigerator answered with its usual hum. When did I become a wallet with legs? No answer, just the faint ticking of the kitchen clock, my only witness. I thought about calling him, telling him how deeply he had cut me. But what would I say? "Son, your wedding broke me?" He'd probably just say, "Mom, you're overreacting." Because in his world, pain was invisible if it didn't come with an invoice. The tears came again, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and steady, like rain leaking through a roof you've ignored too long. I pressed my palms to my face until I couldn't tell if the warmth was from crying or shame. The truth settled heavily in my chest. I wasn't mourning the wedding. I was mourning the years I gave away, believing that giving more would make me matter. It never did. It only made it easier to forget. Around 3:30 a.m., I stood up and walked to the mirror near the hallway. The woman staring back at me wasn't the mother I remembered. She looked older, yes, but also clearer. Her eyes were tired, but sharp, like glass finally cleaned after years of dust. There was no smile, no softness, just recognition. I whispered to her, "No one is coming to save you, Martha." And for once, I didn't cry after saying it. There was something freeing in the truth. Painful, yes, but solid. Something I could build on. I went back to the table and started writing. At the top of the page, October 15th, inventory. Underneath, I didn't list cakes or supplies. I listed people. Derek, overdrawn. Alyssa, counterfeit sweetness. Myself, unpaid, undervalued, still standing. When the list was done, I closed the notebook. My handwriting had changed. Straighter, firmer. It looked like someone who finally understood her worth. The first light of dawn crept through the window, brushing over the empty cake box. I watched it and thought, this is what endings look like. Quiet, simple, clean, no shouting, no revenge, just clarity. I washed my teacup, dried it carefully, and placed it upside down on the rack. Then I looked at my hands again. The same hands that had spent a lifetime creating sweetness for others. For the first time, I wondered what they could create for me. By 6 a.m., I'd made a decision. Not a loud one, not a movie moment, just a quiet promise to myself. I would never bake for people who treated me like a ghost at their own celebration. I tied my scarf, stepped outside, and let the morning air hit my face. It was cool, almost cold, but it felt like the truth. And as the sun rose, I whispered to the empty street. They said I wasn't special, but maybe I just gave my special away for too long. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. My body felt heavy, but my mind was clear. Grief had burned away the fog, leaving only decisions. I made coffee, black, no sugar. Sweetness didn't feel right anymore. As the steam rose, I stared at the calendar pinned above the fridge. The date was still circled in red, Derek's wedding day. Under it, I wrote a single word in blue ink, end. Then I opened my drawer and took out the small black notebook, the same one where I'd recorded every payment, every favor, every mom, please. For years, those pages had been proof of my love. Now they looked more like evidence. Page by page, I tore out the duplicates, the ones I'd signed as co-signer, guarantor, authorized user. My name had been written everywhere, like a watermark of devotion, and today I was erasing it. I called my bank at 9:01 a.m. The woman on the line had a soft southern drawl. "Good morning, Ms. Jefferson. How can I help you today?" I took a breath. "I'd like to close a joint account ending in 4729. May I ask the reason for closure?" "Yes," I said quietly, "because it's no longer joint." The line went silent for a moment, then she said, "Understood, ma'am. Please come by with your ID to finalize." So I did. At the bank, the air smelled like paper and air conditioning. People moved in slow, polite lines, their shoes clicking against the marble floor. When my turn came, I sat across from a young teller named Brandon. He couldn't have been older than my grandson might have been if I'd ever been allowed to have one. He smiled kindly. "You're closing the account, ma'am." "Yes." He glanced at the screen. "This account's co-holder is your son?" I nodded. His eyes flickered with something. Recognition, maybe pity. But I didn't need either. I just needed closure. He handed me the withdrawal slip. "Please sign here." My pen didn't shake this time. As the ink dried, it felt like cutting a wire that had been strangling me for years. When he passed me the cashier's check, I asked him to print a statement. Every transaction, every date. He did. It was 6 pages long. I folded it neatly and slipped it into my purse. Proof, not pain. Outside, the autumn wind brushed my scarf. For the first time, I didn't feel cold. Next stop was Derek's Cafe, the grind room, the same place I had poured my savings into. Through the window, I could see the morning rush, baristas laughing, customers scrolling, Alyssa behind the counter giving orders like a queen. The gold sign still shimmered in the sun, family owned since 2021. Funny how one word could be such a lie. I walked inside. The bell above the door jingled, but no one looked up at first. Then Alyssa did. Her smile froze. "Martha," she said, polite and sharp. "We didn't expect you." "I know," I replied. "You rarely do." She gestured awkwardly. "We're kind of busy." "I won't take long," I said, placing an envelope on the counter. Inside, the final invoice from my bakery for every order I'd ever filled for the grind room. Cakes, pastries, custom muffins, all marked paid in advance by Martha Jefferson. Her eyes darted to the line that mattered. Future supply discontinued. "Wait, are you saying you're not baking for us anymore?" I smiled. "No, Alyssa. I'm saying I only bake for special people." The words came out calm, almost gentle, but they hit her like a slap wrapped in silk. She blinked, mouth slightly open. Somewhere behind her, the espresso machine hissed like it was listening. Derek appeared from the back, adjusting his apron. "Mom, what's going on?" I turned to him, steady. "Nothing, baby, just business. I closed our joint account. The cafe will need to cover its own costs now." He frowned. "Why would you do that?" "Because you already have everything you wanted," I said, "and now I'd like to keep what's left of me." For a moment, silence stretched between us, the kind that carries years of unspoken things. Then I picked up my purse. "Take care, Derek. Congratulations again." And I walked out. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of roasted coffee and regret. My steps felt lighter, almost defiant. For the first time in decades, I wasn't giving away my labor or my love. I was reclaiming it. I stopped at a park bench across the street and sat down, watched people coming and going, none of them knowing that a 68-year-old woman had just declared her independence inside a coffee shop. I took out the envelope copy and smiled at the line I'd written at the bottom, effective immediately. Supplier terminates unpaid emotional labor. I laughed quietly. It sounded strange, brittle, but real. Then I whispered, just to myself, "Special people only." And in that moment, I knew. The world hadn't changed. I had. I didn't have to wait long. By evening, my phone started buzzing like a trapped insect. 8 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 2 text messages that read, "Mom, please call me back," and "You're overreacting, let's talk." I stared at the screen, then turned the phone face down. Peace had a sound. Silence. And I wasn't ready to trade it for noise again. By midnight, they'd moved to phase 2, guilt. Alyssa sent a long message filled with emojis and excuses. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Martha. It was just a misunderstanding. The wedding planner must have messed up the list. You know how chaotic weddings are." I read it twice. Not a single word of responsibility, just glitter, glued over rot. Then Derek called again. I answered, just once. "Mom," he said quickly, voice shaky, "you didn't have to do all this. We were going to talk after the honeymoon." "I see," I said. "You had time to talk to the bank before that?" Silence. Then his tone hardened. "You're making a scene. People are asking questions. You're hurting the business." "The business?" I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call our family now?" He sighed. "Mom, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you should—" "Don't finish that sentence," I cut in. "If you tell me to rest or see someone, I swear I'll hang up." He stopped. I could almost hear him blink through the phone. So I did hang up. The next morning, I opened the bakery at 7 a.m. as usual. Flour on my apron, cinnamon in the air, gospel humming low. For a few precious minutes, life felt normal again, until I looked up and saw them. Derek and Alyssa standing right outside the glass door. He looked nervous. She looked rehearsed. I unlocked the door slowly because I wanted to see what kind of play they were performing today. "Mom," Derek started, voice low, "can we come in?" "This is a business," I said. "Customers are always welcome." They stepped inside. Alyssa's perfume hit me first. Floral, too sweet. She clutched a bouquet of lilies. "We just wanted to apologize," she said. Her smile was soft, trained. She placed the flowers on the counter like a peace offering that smelled like guilt. Derek shoved his hands into his jacket. "Look, I know the wedding thing was bad, but cutting off the account, canceling orders, that's extreme." I wiped my hands on a towel. "Extreme is suing your mother for custody of her money." He flinched. "What? No one's suing you." "Not yet," I said, meeting his eyes. "But I know the pattern, Derek. First comes guilt, then comes control." Alyssa spoke up. "We're family. We just need to calm down and find a solution." "The solution," I said evenly, "is boundaries. You both should try them sometime." They exchanged a look, the silent kind married couples share when the script isn't working. Then Derek's tone shifted. "Mom, you're not yourself lately. Everyone's worried. You've been off." Gaslighting. Classic. I almost smiled. Off? You mean I've stopped funding your lifestyle? That kind of off. He looked away. That's not fair. I stepped closer. Neither is being erased from my own child's wedding guest list. Alyssa tried again, her voice sugar-coated with pity. We were under pressure. You know how expensive weddings are. We just needed my money, I finished. Her smile cracked. That's not true. I leaned forward slightly. Then prove it. Tell me one thing about me that doesn't involve what I can give you. Silence. Not the heavy, grieving kind, the revealing kind, the kind that tells you everything you need to know. I turned back to the oven. Your coffee's on the house, I said, but that's the last free thing you'll ever get from me. They didn't move. For a moment, Derek looked like he might cry, but I'd seen those tears before, the kind that show up when the money stops, not when love does. He finally whispered, "We'll regret this later." I hope so, I said, pulling a tray from the oven. Regret builds character. They left without another word. The bell above the door jingled softly, the same sound it made when customers came in, except now it sounded like release. That afternoon, the phone started ringing again, this time unknown numbers, voices asking strange questions. Is this Mrs. Jefferson? We're from the county office. Someone had filed a welfare check, claiming I might be mentally unstable. I laughed when the social worker showed up. She was young, kind, and uncomfortable. I just need to confirm you're okay living alone, ma'am, she said. I invited her in, offered her a slice of pie, and handed her a folder. Bank records, medical certificates, business license, proof of income. She blinked. You're very organized. Yes, I said. Apparently, that's suspicious now. She smiled awkwardly. You'd be surprised how many families weaponize concern. I wouldn't, I said. When she left, she shook my hand. You're fine, Ms. Jefferson. I'll close the case. Thank you, I said. Please send them the bill. That night, I wrote again in my notebook. They came with flowers, not love, with pity, not apology. They think I'll break. They still don't know who taught them to stand. Then I underlined 3 words. Proof, not pain. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel angry. I just felt awake. After the social worker left, the house exhaled. I stood at the doorway listening to the quiet settle back in, like dust after a storm. Peace felt foreign, fragile, but real. I brewed another cup of coffee and stared at the stack of documents she'd admired. Bank statements, business license, and medical checkups. Proof that I was still here, still capable, still mine. But proof alone wouldn't keep me safe. I needed protection. Legal, not emotional. That night, I found Mrs. Green's business card tucked inside my recipe book. She'd been a customer for years, widowed attorney, sharp as a carving knife, soft as pound cake when she wanted to be. I dialed the number before fear could change my mind. Green and Associates, a calm voice answered. Hi, this is Martha Jefferson. I think I might be in trouble. There was a pause, then, Martha, sweetheart, come by tomorrow morning. Bring everything. Her office smelled like cedar and coffee. She didn't waste time on sympathy. She handed me a legal pad. Start from the beginning, she said. I told her everything. The wedding, the erased name, the closed account, the welfare check. She listened, pen tapping lightly, eyes narrowing only when I mentioned the phrase joint account. Classic, she murmured. Financial elder abuse. Happens every day, but people don't like calling it that when it's family. Abuse? The word tasted strange. Yes, she said firmly. When someone uses your trust or dependency to control your finances, it's abuse, and you can fight it. I swallowed hard. No one had ever called it that out loud. For years, I'd labeled it love, help, and sacrifice. But hearing it defined so clearly felt like someone had opened a window in a room I didn't know was locked. She made copies of every record I'd brought, slid them into color-coded folders, then looked at me over her glasses. First, we document everything: transfers, messages, emails, and even that welfare report. Second, we establish your independence: medical exam, competency statement, updated will. Third, you stop speaking to them without counsel present. I nodded, writing each step like a recipe I intended to follow to the letter. When we finished, she reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "Martha, you're not crazy. You're just finally drawing the line." The words cracked something inside me. Not pain this time, but relief. Driving home, the sky was the color of baked caramel. I rolled down the window and let the wind hit my face. For the first time, the road didn't feel lonely. It felt wide, possible. That evening, I sat in the bakery office and created a new folder on my computer, Case Jefferson. Inside, I saved scanned bank slips, copies of messages, and photos of receipts. I even recorded a short video diary just for me. "Day 1, I said into the camera. They tried to paint me as unstable. Today I found language for what happened. Financial elder abuse. I won't forget those words again." Within a week, Mrs. Green introduced me to a small network of women, retired teachers, widows, nurses, all of them older, all of them scarred by the same quiet theft. We met at a local community center every Thursday night. Someone brought cookies, someone else brought files. No one brought shame. I listened as they told stories that mirrored mine: a son who borrowed a mortgage, a niece who emptied an account for emergencies. Every voice trembled at first, then grew stronger. When it was my turn, I said, "My son told me I wasn't special." The room fell silent, then one woman nodded. "He was right," she said softly. "You're not special. You're standard. That's the problem. This happens to all of us." We laughed, bitter, honest laughter. And it felt like healing. By the end of the meeting, we decided to create something together, a small pamphlet called Your Signature Matters. Mrs. Green promised to help us distribute it at clinics and churches. I offered to bake muffins for the launch, this time with my name on the box. Late that night, back home, I sat at my kitchen table under the warm hum of the ceiling fan. I looked around, same walls, same photos, yet everything had shifted. Knowledge had turned the space from a cage into a workshop. I wasn't powerless. I was preparing. I opened my notebook again and wrote, October 21st. Today I learned my pain has a name. Naming it makes it smaller. Then I underlined it twice. Below that I added, tomorrow, bank notary, doctor checkup, update will. When I closed the notebook, I caught my reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back at me didn't look broken anymore. She looked ready. I whispered into the glass, half smile, half warning. They thought I was the cake. They forgot I owned the recipe. Mrs. Green had warned me, when you cut their supply, they'll come for control. She was right. It started on a Tuesday morning, one of those perfect Georgia days when the air smells of rain but never delivers. I just finished boxing muffins for a church order when the mailman handed me an envelope stamped priority legal notice. Inside was a letter from a firm I didn't recognize. The word swam for a moment before sharpening into focus. Petition for temporary guardianship of Martha Jefferson, age 68, filed by Derek Jefferson. My son wanted legal power over me. I sat down slowly. The paper felt heavier than it should have, heavier than any cake pan I'd ever lifted. Every sentence cut the same way: mental decline, poor financial judgment, risk of exploitation. Irony had never been so cruel. I called Mrs. Green. They filed, I said. I figured they might, she replied evenly. Don't panic, it's noise before court. But it's my son. Martha, that's what makes it work. They use your heart as evidence. 2 days later, a social worker and a deputy knocked on my door for another wellness check. The young officer looked embarrassed, reading from his script. Ma'am, we just need to verify you're capable of managing your affairs. I gestured to the kitchen table stacked with invoices, tax forms, and a pie cooling on the rack. "Would you like a slice while you confirm my competence?" He tried not to smile. "No, ma'am. That won't be necessary." The social worker glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the neatness. "You live alone?" "Yes, by choice." She nodded, writing something on her clipboard. After they left, I added their visit to my growing file. Unannounced inspection number 2, initiated by Martha Jefferson. That evening, my phone rang again. Unknown number. A man's voice, polished, professional. "Ms. Jefferson, this is Randall Cole from Cole and Linden Law. I represent your son. He'd like to resolve this privately." "Then he shouldn't have made it public," I said. He cleared his throat. "If you sign a limited power of attorney, the guardianship petition can be withdrawn. It would simply allow your son to assist with financial decisions." Assist. Such a gentle word for takeover. I hung up without another word. 10 minutes later, my landline rang. Derek this time. "Mom, please don't make this worse. Alyssa's crying. The lawyer said—" "I'm sure she's very good at crying," I said. "Tell her to save it for court." "Court? You're going to fight me?" "I already am." He tried a softer tone. "I just want to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From yourself." There it was, the final insult dressed as care. "Son," I said quietly, "you learned business from me. Remember what I told you the day you opened the cafe?" He hesitated. "Always keep receipts?" I smiled. "Exactly." And I hung up. Mrs. Green moved fast. Within a week, we had statements from my doctor, letters from clients, and a notarized declaration of full mental capacity. We filed a countersuit, defamation and financial exploitation attempt. Her assistant, a sharp young woman named Carla, organized every folder by color. "They're expecting tears," she said. "Give them documentation instead." So we did. When Derek's lawyer realized I had representation, his tone changed. "Perhaps we can negotiate," he said. Mrs. Green smiled thinly. "Negotiate what? Her sanity?" Meanwhile, Alyssa tried another tactic, public pity. She posted on social media, "Please pray for my mother-in-law. She's struggling after my wedding and refuses help." Within hours, sympathy flooded in. Hearts, comments, "Poor thing." I printed everyone. Proof, not pain. The hearing date arrived faster than I expected. Fulton County Courthouse smelled of old paper and tension. I wore a navy suit I hadn't touched since Derek's graduation. Mrs. Green whispered, "Remember? Calm wins." Across the aisle, Derek sat with Alyssa. He wouldn't look at me. When the judge entered, the room shifted from gossip to gravity. Derek's lawyer began, "Your Honor, our client is deeply concerned for his mother's well-being. There have been erratic financial decisions, closing accounts, abrupt business changes, symptoms often associated with cognitive decline." He spoke smoothly, confidently. Then Mrs. Green stood. "Your Honor, may I submit Exhibit A through G?" One by one, she laid out the documents. Bank statements showing clean balances, receipts for every withdrawal, a notarized competency evaluation signed by 2 physicians, and finally the welfare check reports, all stamped "no concern." The judge flipped through them silently. "These are recent?" "Yes, Your Honor, last 2 weeks." He nodded slowly. "Proceed." Mrs. Green gestured toward me. "Ms. Jefferson, please tell the court why you closed the joint account." I stood. My voice didn't shake. "Because it was joint in name only. I funded it, they drained it. When I stopped, they called it confusion." The courtroom went still. "I may be 68, Your Honor, but I know theft when I see it, especially when it's wearing a wedding ring my money paid for." A few gasps rippled through the benches. Derek's face drained of color. Alyssa stared at the floor. The judge leaned back. "This petition borders on malicious. Guardianship denied." Then, almost as an afterthought, "Ms. Jefferson, you have every right to manage your affairs, perhaps more wisely than most." Gavel down. Case closed. Outside, the sky opened with a light rain. Mrs. Green handed me an umbrella. Told you, it's noise before court. I nodded, breathing in the clean, wet air. Through the drizzle, I saw Derek standing by the steps, umbrella forgotten, face pale. For a second, I almost pitied him. Then I remembered every sleepless night spent paying his debts. He tried to speak, but I just said, "Go home, Derek. Learn what special means." Then I walked away, the rain washing the last of the frosting from my hands. The rain stopped by the time I got home. The driveway shimmered, silver and clean, like the world had decided to start over with me. I hung my coat by the door and placed the thick court folder on the table. It was heavier than any cookbook I'd ever owned, but the weight felt good this time. It wasn't guilt, it was proof. I sat down, opened the folder, and stared at the stamped seal. Case dismissed. The words looked small, but they sounded like thunder in my chest. For weeks I'd been fighting ghosts, of shame, of debt, of motherhood twisted into servitude. Now there it was, in black ink. Freedom recognized by law. I poured myself a cup of tea and called Mrs. Green. She answered on the first ring. "Congratulations," she said. "How does victory taste?" "Like lemon," I said, glancing at the tea bag floating in my mug. "A little bitter, a little clean." She laughed softly. "Good. Now let's make it count for more than just you." The next day, I printed every page of my case file and slid it into clear sleeves, labeling them carefully. Transfers, letters, welfare checks, guardianship petition, ruling. Then I opened a new binder titled Financial Freedom for Seniors. That night, I called the women from our Thursday group. They answered with warmth, curiosity, and a touch of disbelief. When I told them I'd won the case, the line filled with cheers. "You did it, Martha." "Show us how." "I knew they couldn't fool you forever." I told them I didn't just want to celebrate. I wanted to document. For every woman who didn't have a lawyer or a voice or a folder of proof. We met at the community center that same weekend. The old building smelled of dust and coffee. We sat around a plastic table covered in papers, cookies, and courage. I spread out my files like blueprints. "This," I said, tapping the folder, "is what they don't expect us to have. Receipts, timelines, language." I showed them how to highlight transfers, how to label emotional manipulation as financial coercion, how to log every "Mom, please," and "It's just a signature." Mrs. Green joined us halfway through, carrying a stack of pamphlets hot from the printer. The cover read, "Your Signature Matters. A Guide to Financial Boundaries for Women Over 60. Inside were steps, numbers, examples. My story simplified into lessons. At the bottom it said, "With gratitude to Martha Jefferson." I almost cried seeing my name printed in ink that didn't cost me anything. Word spread faster than we expected. By the next month, we had 30 women attending the meetings, then 50. They came with manila envelopes, receipts, and trembling hands. Each one started the same way. I don't know if this counts as abuse, but it always did. We taught them to keep logs, to file police reports, to talk to banks directly. We made lists of elder law attorneys who wouldn't take advantage of them. We even started a small emergency fund, contributed by members who could spare $20 at a time. I watched them transform week by week, spines straightening, voices sharpening. It was like watching dough rise in the oven, slow, quiet, unstoppable. A local reporter showed up one evening, curious about the bakery lady who beat a guardianship case. She asked if she could write a story. I hesitated at first, but Mrs. Green nudged me. "Tell it in your words," she said, "or someone else will tell it for you." So I did. The article came out 2 weeks later. The headline read, "They called her unstable. She called a lawyer." Underneath, a photo of me standing outside my bakery, apron dusted with flour, holding a slice of lemon cake. The caption, "Sweet Justice." Customers started coming in just to shake my hand. Some came to order cakes, others came to tell stories. A retired nurse whispered, "My son took my car. Can you help me find someone like your lawyer?" A widow left me a note on a napkin. Thank you for saying what we couldn't. I kept every note in a small wooden box labeled Special People. One Thursday, as I was leaving the meeting, Mrs. Green caught up with me in the parking lot. "You realize what you've done, right?" she said. "I baked another cake?" She laughed. "You turned survival into a curriculum. That's rarer than justice." The night air was cool, carrying the smell of rain again. I looked up at the stars, faint through the city haze. "I used to think strength meant keeping quiet," I said. "Now I know silence was the recipe they taught us. We just changed the ingredients." She smiled. "Keep it that way." When I got home, I found another envelope on my porch, this one handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photo of Derek and Alyssa. They looked tired, smaller somehow. On the back, he'd written, "I'm sorry, Mom. We lost the cafe. I hope you're okay." I didn't cry. I didn't call. I just placed the photo in the wooden box with the others. Maybe one day, forgiveness would join the collection. But not today. That night, I wrote a new line in my notebook. Proof builds walls. Community builds doors. Then I underlined it once and closed the book, feeling lighter than I had in years. The invitation arrived exactly 6 months after the court ruling, printed on glossy ivory paper, the kind that smells faintly of money and denial. Across the top, the Grind Room Grand Reopening Celebration. Across the bottom, in gold script, hosted by Derek and Alyssa Jefferson. For a long minute, I just stared at it. The irony was almost sweet. After losing the cafe to debt, they had found a new investor, some young tech entrepreneur, and now they wanted to celebrate the rebirth of a family business. Maybe they thought I'd stay home like before. Maybe they thought out of sight still meant out of power. They were wrong. I placed the card on the counter right beside my binder labeled Proof and whispered to the empty kitchen, "Time to teach the final lesson." The night of the reopening was warm and humid, the kind of southern evening that makes silk stick to your skin. The cafe looked brighter than ever. Fairy lights strung across the patio, jazz playing from hidden speakers, guests sipping champagne beneath a banner that read, "A New Beginning." Through the glass, I saw Derek shaking hands, Alyssa posing for photos. They looked like a couple trying to convince the world they hadn't just survived scandal, that they were still special people. I walked in quietly, no announcement. Some heads turned, some didn't recognize me right away. Then Alyssa's smile froze mid-laugh. Derek turned, his glass halfway to his lips. "Mom." The word came out half-breath, half-warning. "Good evening," I said, calm as the tide. "Congratulations on the new start." I held up a small envelope, thick, white, embossed with gold. "Thought I'd bring you something. It's polite to return what doesn't belong to me." Alyssa blinked. "What is that?" "Ownership transfer papers," I said. "For the name, the Grind Room. You filed to use it again, didn't you?" Derek frowned. "Yeah, but—" "You can't," I interrupted gently. "I trademarked it 3 months ago." Gasps rippled through the nearby guests. Alyssa's eyes widened. You what?" "I own the name, the logo, even the slogan on your napkins. You can keep the chairs, though. Those are hideous." Laughter burst from a few corners of the room, stifled quickly by shock. Derek's face went red. "Mom, this is embarrassing." "For you, maybe. For me, it's documentation." I placed the envelope on a nearby table, neatly beside the champagne glasses. "Inside, you'll find proof of registration and a cease and desist letter. You have 30 days to change the signage." Alyssa's voice trembled. "You'd really do this to your own son?" I met her gaze. "My son did this to himself. I'm just labeling the evidence." The room went still, the kind of stillness that comes before thunder. One guest, a local reporter I recognized from the newspaper, lifted her phone discreetly. "Is this on record?" she whispered. "Of course," I said. "Transparency is my new policy." Derek tried to regain control, raising his voice. "She's twisting everything. She's been unstable for years." Mrs. Green's voice sliced through the noise before I could speak. "I wouldn't finish that sentence, Mr. Jefferson." Every head turned. She'd entered quietly, folder in hand, impeccable as always. She flashed her attorney's badge just long enough for the reporter's camera to catch it. "Defamation in public is still defamation," she said smoothly, "and I'd hate to file a second suit." Derek froze. Alyssa sank into a chair. The crowd murmured, uneasy, fascinated. Mrs. Green stepped forward, her voice low but carrying. "This woman raised a son, funded his business, and when she reclaimed her name, he called her unstable. Tonight she reclaims something else, her dignity." Applause started, hesitant at first, then building like rainfall. I hadn't expected it. I just stood there, still holding my purse, the sound washing over me like sunlight after years of shadow. Derek whispered something to Alyssa and slipped toward the back exit. She followed, head down. The banner fluttered above them. A new beginning. How fitting. Just not the one they'd planned. After the crowd dispersed, the reporter approached me. "Ms. Jefferson, any comment for tomorrow's story?" I smiled. "Yes. Quote me exactly. Family should never require a receipt." She nodded, writing it down. Behind her, Mrs. Green squeezed my arm. "You did beautifully." "I didn't even raise my voice," I said. "That's the point." We stepped outside together. The night air was soft, carrying the faint smell of roasted coffee and rain. The neon sign above the cafe flickered once, then went dark. A coincidence, maybe, but I liked the symbolism. Mrs. Green opened her umbrella. "What now?" "I bake," I said, "but this time I choose the guest list." The next morning, social media exploded. The headline read, "Mother wins again. The grind room shut down over trademark dispute." Below it, photos of me, calm, smiling, papers in hand, surrounded by onlookers. The comments poured in. Queen behavior. "Protect your peace, Ms. Jefferson. This is how you handle betrayal with receipts." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel ashamed of my name appearing online. It wasn't a scandal anymore. It was a statement. I taped the article beside my bakery's counter right above the register. Under it, a small handwritten sign read, "Special people only. News travels fast in small towns." By the end of the week, everyone from the post office to the grocery store had seen the headline, "Mother trademarked her son's cafe," and won. I didn't plan for fame, I planned for peace. But peace has a way of echoing when it finally arrives. Customers began trickling into my bakery, curious at first, then loyal. They bought cupcakes and asked questions. "Is it true, Ms. Jefferson?" "It's true," I said simply. "I just protected what was mine." Meanwhile, the grind room closed its doors. They had 30 days to rebrand, but couldn't afford the new signage or legal fees. Investors backed out. The shiny, grand reopening turned into a liquidation sale. I didn't go near the place, but people talked. In small towns, they always do. At the diner, someone whispered, "He shouldn't have crossed his mama." At the salon, that woman had receipts sharper than knives. And at church, the pastor smiled as I passed and said, "Martha, the Lord sure knows how to balance books." I laughed because it was true. Justice had come quietly, like the smell of fresh bread. Invisible, but undeniable. One evening, Mrs. Green called. "You've officially become a local legend," she teased. "Then I hope legends get senior discounts," I said, making her laugh. But beneath the humor, there was an ache, because even victory leaves a bruise. A month later, Derek showed up at the bakery. I recognized the sound of his footsteps before I saw him. Slower, heavier than I remembered. He looked older, shoulders slumped, tie loosened. "Mom," he said quietly, standing by the door. The word didn't sting anymore. It just existed. "Derek." I wiped my hands on my apron but didn't move closer. He looked around, eyes landing on the framed newspaper article above the counter. "So it's true," he murmured. "It's public record," I said. He nodded, jaw tight. "Alyssa left. Investors pulled out. We're broke." "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Truly, He looked up, searching my face for cruelty. There wasn't any. I didn't mean for things to get that far, he said. I know. I thought if I controlled the money, maybe I could fix things. Control doesn't fix, I said. It hides fear, and fear is hungry. He sank into a chair. I just wanted you to be proud of me. I always was, I said, until you forgot who taught you to stand. He covered his face with his hands. What do I do now? I wanted to reach out. I didn't. You start from nothing, I said. That's how I started. The difference is I built something honest. He nodded, silent. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. I don't deserve forgiveness. Maybe not, I said, but you can still deserve growth. He left without buying anything, but before he walked out, he turned back and whispered, Thank you for teaching me how to lose. The weeks that followed were strangely calm. Alyssa moved back to her parents' house upstate. Someone said she tried to open a small cafe of her own, but it folded within 2 months. Derek found work at a construction site. I never called to confirm. I didn't need to. Some lessons are learned best without an audience. One morning, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a folded check for $500 and a note that read, For your Thursday group, consider it my first repayment. The signature was unmistakable. Derek. I stared at the check for a long time. Then I smiled, tucked it into our community fund, and wrote on the ledger, Received. 1 apology, partial payment, full circle. By late spring, the story had reached further than Georgia. An advocacy group invited me to speak at a seminar about financial independence for older women. They offered to pay for travel, hotel, and everything. Mrs. Green insisted I go. You're the proof that it's never too late to redraw the line, she said. At the seminar, I stood in front of 50 women, strangers, yet familiar. I told them about the wedding, the guest list, the lawsuit, and the cake. I told them about the silence that taught me strength. And when I finished, the room erupted in applause, not loud, but long. One woman came up afterward, tears in her eyes. I thought I was too old to start over, she said, but you made me believe I can. I squeezed her hand. You can. You just have to close the account that drains you first. That night, back at the hotel, I sat by the window watching city lights shimmer. The skyline looked like sugar crystals against a dark sheet of velvet. I thought about everything that had burned down and everything that had grown from the ashes. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, You're free. I whispered back, I know. Then I reached for my notebook and wrote, They lost everything I once gave them, money, status, comfort, but I found everything they never had, peace, clarity, self-respect. I closed the book and turned off the light. Tomorrow I would bake again, not for profit, not for penance, but for joy. Because freedom, I realized, tastes like warm bread on a quiet morning, and the only recipe you need is courage. Spring came early that year. The air in Atlanta smelled like wet grass and clean beginnings. For the first time in decades, I woke up without an alarm, no orders waiting, no guilt brewing stronger than the coffee. Freedom, it turned out, didn't make noise. It hummed quietly, like a song only you could hear. I reopened my bakery under a new name, Special People Bakery. Same ovens, same walls, same pair of hands, but a different heartbeat. The sign outside was simple, gold letters on matte black wood, hanging above the door I'd once locked in shame. People stopped to read it, smiled, and walked in. Some came for the cookies, most came for the story. Inside, the place looked lighter. I'd painted the walls a warm cream, hung new curtains, filled the counter with glass jars of lemon bars, pecan pies, and chocolate muffins. But the real change wasn't the decor. It was me. I no longer baked for survival. I baked for meaning. Every Wednesday, I taught a free class called Bake It Forward for Women Over 60. We'd gather around the old oak table with aprons and laughter, flour in our hair, music on low. Some were widows, some divorced, some just lonely. They came in quietly, left louder. We talked about boundaries while rolling dough, about courage while waiting for the timer to ring. Each of them carried a story like mine. Different ingredients, same recipe of hurt and healing. At the end of every class, I made them repeat after me, "Love doesn't mean losing yourself." They'd laugh, embarrassed, but by the fourth week, they said it louder. Mrs. Green dropped by often, pretending it was for pie, but really to check that I hadn't gone soft again. She'd sit at the counter, glasses on the tip of her nose, and say, "Martha, you turned pain into curriculum. That's a gift." I'd smile. "No, that's management." Outside of the bakery, my world kept expanding. The community fund grew. We partnered with local churches and banks to host financial literacy workshops for older adults. They called it Project Proof. The slogan was mine: proof, not pain. Once a month, I spoke at senior centers and libraries. I'd bring a box of cupcakes and a copy of my story printed from the newspaper. I'd tell them, "The law can protect you, but only if you believe you deserve protection." Some of them cried. Some of them laughed through tears. And after every talk, one woman would come up, clutch my hand, and whisper, "You made me brave." Every time I thought, "No, honey, you were brave already. I just reminded you." 6 months into the new bakery, business was better than ever. Not because of pity, but because people tasted integrity. I refused big orders that came with bad energy. One woman offered to pay double for her daughter's wedding cake. She said, "Money's no issue, we just need it perfect." I smiled. "Perfection costs more than dollars. Try honesty first." She didn't come back. I slept fine. That summer, I did something I'd never done before. I took a vacation. Just me, a train ticket, and a suitcase full of quiet. I traveled to Savannah, a place I'd always promised myself but never reached. The city smelled like sea salt and magnolias. I walked along the riverfront, ate peach cobbler at sunset, watched families taking photos, couples holding hands. Not once did I feel envy, only peace. At a small cafe near the pier, a young waitress asked, "Are you celebrating something, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "Myself?" She laughed. "That's the best kind of celebration." She was right. Back home, my Thursday group surprised me with a banner, "To Martha for teaching us that age is not a cage." They baked me a cake, vanilla with lemon glaze, my favorite, and wrote across it in messy icing, "Special people forever." We laughed until we cried, not because of sorrow this time, but because laughter finally felt safe again. One quiet evening, I sat outside the bakery with a cup of tea and watched the streetlights blink on. The air was thick with the scent of sugar and night jasmine. A girl passed by, maybe 16, holding her mother's hand. I smiled, thinking how love, when done right, doesn't drain. It feeds. I thought of Derek then. He hadn't called since the check, but sometimes that silence felt like respect. In my heart, I'd forgiven him halfway. Enough to breathe, not enough to forget. Forgiveness, I learned, wasn't for the other person. It was the oxygen you give yourself to keep living. I whispered into the dark, "Wherever you are, son, I hope you're learning what real work feels like." Then I lifted my cup to the sky, to whatever God was listening. The next morning, I placed a new sign by the window. It read, "We don't sell sweetness, we teach resilience." Below it, I taped a small photo from my Savannah trip. Me standing by the water, wind in my hair, eyes forward. For once, the picture looked exactly how I felt. Free. That night, I wrote my final line for the day in the old blue notebook that had once been filled with debts. I used to bake for love. Now I bake from love. And the difference tastes like peace. Then I closed the book, turned off the lights, and let the smell of bread and freedom fill the room. The bakery was quiet after closing, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Outside, the Georgia sky burned soft gold before melting into dusk. I wiped the counter one last time, turned off the ovens, and sat by the window with a cup of mint tea. The smell of warm bread lingered in the air, the hum of the city just beginning beyond the glass. For a long moment, I watched the sign outside, Special People Bakery, sway gently in the wind. The gold letters caught the fading light, glowing like something blessed. And I thought, 68 years to learn what special really means. Not who you bake for, not who you forgive, but who you become when no one's clapping anymore. I took out the old blue notebook, the same one that once held debts and guilt and sleepless nights. The last page was still blank. I clicked my pen and began to write. I'm 68, and I finally understand that love without respect is just labor. I paused, letting the words sink in. They felt clean. No bitterness, no sorrow, just truth. I gave away decades believing motherhood meant endless giving. But love is not a charity. It's a contract signed in dignity. The clock ticked softly behind me. I kept writing, line after line, not for anyone else this time, but for the woman I used to be. I don't bake for applause anymore. I bake because creation is proof that I survived destruction. Flour, sugar, butter, alchemy for the soul, and every loaf I pull from the oven reminds me I rose too. I smiled. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. A light knock on the door pulled me back. It was one of my students, a woman named Gloria, 72, who joined the Bake It Forward class 3 months ago. She carried a small box wrapped in brown paper. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said softly. I just wanted to bring this. Inside was a cake, simple, one layer frosted with uneven swirls. On top, written in shaky icing, were the words, "Thank you for teaching us to stand." I laughed so hard I nearly cried. "Gloria, it's perfect," she smiled, wiping her eyes. "I still can't frost straight lines." "Sweetheart," I said, "straight lines are overrated." When she left, I cut myself a slice and took a bite. It was imperfect and wonderful, exactly how healing should taste. As the night deepened, I turned on the small lamp by the counter. Its light cast a soft circle across the walls, illuminating the photos I'd hung there. Women laughing in aprons, a courtroom victory certificate, a snapshot from Savannah, me standing by the water, wind in my hair. Beneath them, I'd placed one final frame, a handwritten quote on parchment paper. It read, "True freedom isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision to stop baking for those who cause it." I touched the glass gently, then looked at the camera set up by the register, the one I used to record short videos for the bakery's YouTube channel. Tonight, I decided, I'd speak directly to whoever was listening out there. The red light blinked on. "Hello, friends," I began, voice steady, warm. "I'm Martha Jefferson, and this isn't a revenge story. It's a recovery story." I leaned closer to the lens. "Maybe you've given too much, too. Maybe you've poured love into people who only ever came to drink it dry. And maybe you've started believing you're the problem." I shook my head. "You're not. You're just tired. And tired doesn't mean weak. It means you've carried too much for too long." I smiled, small but real. "If this story found you, I hope it reminds you that you can still begin again, even at 68. Even when the world thinks your chapter is done." I raised my teacup. "To every woman who forgot her worth, may you remember it before anyone else defines it for you." Then I said the words that had carried me through every storm. I only bake for special people, and today, that includes me. I ended the recording and sat in the quiet again. Outside, a few late passers-by peered through the window, reading the sign, smiling at the glow of the bakery. I waved. One of them waved back. Maybe they'd never know my story. Maybe they'd just taste the cake and feel something gentle, the flavor of resilience, of dignity, of freedom baked slow and true. Either way, that was enough. Before turning off the lights, I opened my notebook one last time and wrote, "Tin yu that hong ko bang jia, and freedom, my dear, will never be too expensive." Then I placed the pen beside it, flipped the open sign to closed, and whispered to the empty shop, "Good night, Martha. You did it." The air smelled of sugar and second chances, and somewhere beyond the dark windows, the world turned quietly toward morning.